All right, let's dive in. Germany's auto industry is on strike, and it's a big deal. You guys sent in some great sources, a firsthand account especially, that really puts you right there on the picket line.
Yeah, it's intense stuff, for sure.
So our mission today, figure out what's going on, why it should matter to you, even if you don't drive a German car, and what could happen next.
And potentially some ripple effects, I think, beyond Germany, too.
Totally. Okay, so to set the scene, we're talking about companies like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, these iconic brands.
And production's at a standstill, yeah.
A standstill. And it's not just the factory workers, right?
No, it's the entire ecosystem. We're talking logistics, we're talking transportation, we're talking dealerships.
Oh, wow. So it really is like a chain reaction.
It is.
One of the sources mentioned Volkswagen's planned job cuts, and that seems to have been like a real turning point. So was this level of worker frustration kind of brewing for a while, or did this really catch people off guard?
I think, honestly, the frustration's been building for some time, I'd say. You've got globalization, you've got technological disruption, and the cost of living is squeezing workers from all sides.
It's the perfect storm almost.
Yeah. And what's really interesting here is that it isn't just about economic anxieties, you know? It taps into a deeper sense of unease about the future. Like a feeling that the old way of doing things between workers and corporations is kind of fraying at the edges.
It makes you wonder if this is a preview of what's coming for other industries too. When you sent that article about automation impacting your own industry, it really made me think about that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the workers' demands. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Better pay, working conditions, and job security. But is there something more there?
Definitely. I think if you look deeper, it's about agency. It's about having a voice, a say in the future of an industry that's going through this massive transformation.
And a lot of that anxiety seems to stem from technology, right? Like the shift to electric vehicles. Some sources mention a skills gap. But are the new jobs in things like battery technology or software development, are those really enough to make up for potential losses in more traditional manufacturing roles?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the transition is definitely creating some opportunities, but it also requires a huge investment in retraining and reskilling. And there's a real fear amongst these workers that they'll get left behind, that their expertise will become obsolete.
It's almost like they're on a sinking ship and they need a lifeboat.
Yeah, exactly.
Some sources even tied those demands, especially around job security, directly to the rise of automation. Like, it's not just about a skills gap, it's about being replaced by robots.
Right, precisely. That adds a whole nother layer of complexity to the situation. I mean, workers are seeing these robots take over tasks they used to do, and they're worried, which makes sense.
Absolutely. So, economic anxiety, technological disruption, feeling like they've lost control. I mean, no wonder they walked off the line. But what about the companies? How are they responding?
Well, they're in a tough spot. There's immense pressure to adapt, to stay competitive in this new market.
Yeah.
But they also need their workforce, right? That's their most valuable asset.
Some economists say they have to cut costs, embrace automation just to survive. But can they really thrive if they alienate their workforce in the process?
It's a real dilemma. And it's happening against the backdrop of Germany's whole labor relations model. You know, collaboration and partnership have been the norm there. This strike is like a stress test on that whole model.
So where does the German government fit into all of this? It seems like they're trying to walk a tightrope, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. They've got the auto industry. It's the backbone of their economy. So they want it to succeed. But they also have a responsibility to their workers who have a lot of political power.
It's a tough balance. Some sources even suggested the government might have to step in, maybe impose a solution from the top down.
It's possible. But finding a solution that works for everyone, the companies, the workers, the economy as a whole, it's a complex equation, lots of moving parts. You know, it's interesting to see how this strike's kind of shaking things up. For decades, German auto workers have been like the model of collaboration, working with the companies, not against them. But this feels different, don't you think?
Yeah, like all this disruption and uncertainty is putting that collaborative spirit to the test. The sources talk about this feeling among workers that they've been pushed too far, like nobody's listening.
Right. And it goes beyond wages or benefits. It's about respect. Having a say in decisions that directly impact them, you know? I think this strike shows that even with all this automation, human workers still have power.
Some sources even suggested this could be a turning point, not just for Germany, but for labor movements globally. Is that overstating it? You've been studying these trends for a while.
It's definitely a sign of the times, I think. Workers everywhere are feeling these same pressures. And they're starting to realize that collective action can actually get results. So, yeah, what's happening in Germany, it could inspire similar movements.
Okay, so let's talk solutions. If this is a power shift, what does that new balance look like? A lot of sources talked about reskilling, retraining programs, but is that enough to really calm those anxieties about job security in the age of automation?
It's essential, yeah. But it can't be the only answer. We need to think bigger. How do we create a future of work that's both technologically advanced but also fair to everyone?
You know, it makes me think about that article you sent on universal basic income. Is that something that could help smooth the transition as more and more jobs get automated?
It's worth exploring for sure. There are no easy answers, but we need to be open to new ideas, right? Bold solutions.
What about stronger unions? Some sources said that could give workers more of a voice in how things are run, but others argued that unions can be too rigid, too slow to adapt, especially in industries like tech that are constantly changing.
It is a tough balance. Unions are important. They protect workers' rights. They advocate for their interests. But they need to be able to adapt, too, to be forward-thinking.
So thinking outside the traditional union model, what about giving workers more of a stake in the companies they work for, like employee ownership, profit sharing? Would that help?
Those are really interesting ideas. It's about creating a sense of shared purpose, you know, moving away from that us versus them mentality between workers and management, finding a more collaborative, equitable way to do things.
Okay, so those are some solutions at the company level, but what about the government? A lot of the sources you sent said the German government needs to do more to support workers during this transition.
Absolutely. The government has a huge role to play, investing in education and training, providing a safety net for workers who lose their jobs, creating an environment that encourages innovation and job creation.
Some even suggested regulating the pace of automation, like slowing down certain technologies to protect jobs. But wouldn't that stifle innovation, hurt Germany in the long run?
It's tough. There's no easy answer. It's about finding that balance, protecting jobs versus encouraging innovation. And getting that right is going to be key for Germany's future.
The sources we've looked at so far, they paint this really complex picture, the strike, all the implications. I'm curious, from your perspective, are there any historical parallels here, past labor movements that faced similar challenges?
There are definitely some echoes of those past industrial revolutions, yeah? New technologies disrupting the old ways of doing things, leading to unrest. The Luddite movement, for example, early 19th century. Workers destroying textile machinery. They were scared to take their jobs.
But those machines weren't destroyed, and the textile industry kept evolving, so what can we learn from that?
Well, I think it shows us that progress can't be stopped. But it also shows how important it is to pay attention to the consequences, the social consequences. We got to make sure progress benefits everyone, not just a few people at the top.
Which brings us back to this question. How do we navigate this revolution, this technological revolution, in a way that's good for everyone? We've talked a lot about the human side of it, but I think it's time to dig into the technology itself. Okay, so we've talked about this tension, workers versus technology. Let's get specific. Electric vehicles, all the sources pointed to that as a major disruption. Is this shift really that big of a deal for German auto workers?
It's tough, right? Because on the one hand, Germany's been like the leader in combustion engine tech.
Right.
You don't lose that expertise overnight.
Right.
So you've got all these workers thinking, okay, what happens to me? Am I going to be building batteries instead of engines 5 years from now?
Yeah, and I get that. Reading those worker accounts, it reminded me of when you sent that article about AI in journalism. We both had that, wait, what does this mean for us moment.
Totally. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating, because it's not all doom and gloom. You know, the sources acknowledge that EVs, they create new jobs too.
But are there enough of those new jobs to like offset what might be lost? And can those same workers even DO those jobs? It's not like you can just turn a mechanic into a battery chemist, right?
Exactly. That's the challenge. And that's where the government and the companies need to step up. Investing in training, but not just any training, really targeted stuff.
So like anticipating those specific changes, not just reacting once jobs are gone.
That's it. Because there's another thing, even bigger than EVs, that the sources touch on. Software. Cars are becoming computers on wheels, basically.
So the auto industry starts to look a lot more like Silicon Valley. Different skills, different culture, maybe even different expectations for workers.
You're getting it. And the sources that were the most hopeful, they talked about this hybrid workforce, combining that traditional manufacturing know-how with Software developers, data analysts, people who can bridge that gap.
Like those futuristic factories in movies, where it's not just robots welding stuff, but humans working right alongside them, doing the things AI can't.
Yeah. And that's where the whole automation conversation gets really interesting, because even the sources that were critical of the companies, they said that some automation, it just makes sense. It's about what gets automated and how we prepare people for that reality.
It feels like the fear is if a company can choose between retraining and buying a robot, they'll go for the robot every time, especially if there's no pressure from the government to do otherwise.
And that's where the situation in Germany is so unique, I think. Their history with unions, with social safety nets, all of that matters.
Yeah.
The sources suggest this strike could push them to become like a model for how to handle this change ethically.
So almost a test case for the rest of the world. If Germany can balance technological progress with taking care of its workers, maybe other countries can follow their lead.
Exactly.
Eh.
Because in the end, all the sources agree on this. It's not about stopping progress, it's about shaping it, making sure it benefits society, all of society, not just a few.
And that, I think, is what we want our listeners to take away from this. Whether you work in a factory or an office, it doesn't matter. What are you doing to prepare for the future of work? What skills are you learning? What conversations are you having? Because this isn't just a German story. This is a global story. And it's happening right now. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We've covered a lot, from those picket lines in Germany to the future of work itself. And honestly, I'm walking away with more questions than answers. But isn't that what a good deep dive should do? Make you think, challenge your assumptions, make you curious about the world.